नमस्कार। स्वागत है आप सभी का मेधावी क्लासेस के आर्ट्स के इकोनॉमिक्स सेक्शन में। सभी बच्चों को बहुत बहुत नमस्कार। विश्वास है कि आप सभी को मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स का ये सेक्शन नेशनल इनकम अकाउंटिंग और इससे रिलेटेड जो भी डाउट्स और जो कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं वो सभी आपको इस सेक्शन में, इस वीडियो में क्लियर मिलेगा। तो सबसे पहले हम शुरुआत करते हैं। सो आवर टॉपिक, जो आज का हमारा टॉपिक है वो है नेशनल, एक मिनट, नेशनल इनकम अकाउंटिंग। दिस सेक्शन कम्स अंडर मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स। जैसा कि आपको पता है, वी हैव टू सेक्शंस। फर्स्ट इज मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक, सेकेंड इज माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक। सो नेशनल इनकम, employment, banking services, fiscal management, these all came under macroeconomics. So आज हम बात करेंगे नेशनल इनकम की। तो नेशनल इनकम को जानने से पहले और स्टार्ट करने से पहले हम दो बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट पे इस वीडियो पे बात करेंगे। जो पहला कॉन्सेप्ट है द फ्लो of production, and the second one is flow of income. Correct? And the third one, the methods for accounting of national income. Correct. So आइए शुरू करते हैं। Basic concepts of microeconomics: the total flow of production. Now, as per the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, the question is, what generates the economic wealth of a nation? What makes a nation rich or poor? Is it the natural resources that a nation possesses? Natural resources like land, river, forest, minerals like forest, minerals, fertile lands? If yes, then there is a contradiction. क्या contradiction है? We have very resource rich countries like Africa, Latin America, but they are still not developed. We have some countries which are lacking the natural resources, but still they are developed countries. There are some countries which are lacking the natural resources, but still they are developed. So, is it the natural resources or the availability of natural resources? The possession of possessing a natural resources is the parameter जिससे कि हम ये नाप सकते हैं, जिससे हम इस कंक्लूजन पे पहुंच सकते हैं कि ये कंट्री और ये नेशन रिच है या ये नेशन पुअर है. Is it? Then the answer is not. Possessing the natural resources is not the only yardstick or not the only parameter to measure whether a country is rich or poor. The main theme and the main concept is how you are utilizing these natural resources. Availability of natural resources is not sufficient. During the medieval time, during the ancient time also, yes, it was a yardstick, the availability of natural resources. But in fact, from the ancient times or the medieval times to come to the modern times, resources are transformed, resources are processed, and that is the point which makes a country rich, poor, or generates the economic wealth of a nation. So, the economic wealth or well-being of a country depends on how the resources are used in generating flow of production. Resources like minerals, resources like fertile lands, resources like forests, when these resources are used and a flow of production is generated, this flow of production in turn generates the income and wealth of the nation. Then how this flow of production arises, how it becomes active. So the flow of production arises when people combine their energies with natural and man-made environment within a certain social and technological structure, they generate a flow of production. And in modern economics, this flow of production arises out of production of commodities, the goods and services. Suppose we have a land, this is a fertile land. And in this fertile land, there is a farmer, and the farmer is producing wheat. Okay. Now, this wheat, when transformed into flour and when it is sold or manufactured and processed and when it becomes bun or bread, then here look, हमारे पास रिसोर्सेस हैं, हमने रिसोर्सेस को क्या किया, हमने फार्मर की एनर्जी, हमने जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फैक्ट्रीज है उसमें जो काम कर रहे लेबर है उनकी एनर्जीज को कंबाइन किया, ठीक है, और हमने विद द हेल्प ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी हम लोगों ने व्हीट को ट्रांसफॉर्म किया ब्रेड में. एंड अब क्या हुआ, दिस जनरेट्स एंड दिस रिजल्ट्स एज अ प्रोडक्शन और जनरेशन ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. So a flow of production in an economics is generated when the production or when there is the generation of goods and services. So it is very easy. The flow of production arises when people combine their energies with natural and man-made environment within a certain social and technological structure. They generate a flow of production, and the flow of production arises out of production of commodities like goods and services. Now what happens to these commodities after being produced? हमारे पास रिसोर्सेस हैं, हम लोगों ने रिसोर्सेस को इस्तेमाल किया, either the natural resources and the human labor, और हम लोगों ने इसे कंबाइन किया, and then we have produced a good. We have produced commodities, goods and services. Now what happens after the production of goods and commodities? क्या होगा जब हम goods and commodities को produce करेंगे, उसके बाद क्या? What happens to these commodities? Commodities means the goods and services after being produced. So each producer of commodities intends to sell her output. The sell means sellable goods and services produced to the consumers. एक सिंपल इकोनॉमी में आपको पता होगा, एक सिंपल इकोनॉमी में हमारे पास क्या होता है, सबसे पहले रिसोर्सेस होता है. क्या होता है? रिसोर्सेस. फिर हमारे पास होता है प्रोड्यूसर्स, या हम कह सकते हैं मैन्युफैक्चरर्स. And then we have goods and services produced, the commodities produced, and then we have consumers. So the goods and services, the sellable goods and services, which is produced with the help of the flow of production, is sold to the consumers. The consumers एक इंडिविजुअल भी हो सकता है, एक एंटरप्राइज भी हो सकता है. Purchase the commodity either for final use or for use in further production. करेक्ट. नाउ लुक, जैसा कि हमने अभी आपको बताया था, इसको जरा ध्यान से समझिए. ठीक है, अब हम धीमा धीमा कॉन्सेप्ट्स की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं. करेक्ट. कहता है कि द कंज्यूमर, जैसा कि हमने बताया, प्रोड्यूसर या मैन्युफैक्चरर, उसके बाद गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज जो प्रोड्यूस हो रहे हैं उसे एक इकोनॉमी में कंज्यूम करने वाला कोई होना चाहिए, और जो कंज्यूम करता है उसे हम क्या बोलते हैं? कंज्यूमर. ये जो कंज्यूमर है वो क्या हो सकता है? एक इंडिविजुअल हो सकता है, एक एंटरप्राइज हो सकता है. एग्जाम्पल, एक हाउस होल्ड है, देयर इज अ हाउस होल्ड, देयर इज अ फैमिली, and there is a bakery or a factory which makes bread. ठीक है, it manufactures bread. Now a farmer who is farmers are producing wheat for individually consumption by a family or by a single individual. Suppose this family purchased 15 kilogram of wheat, or say 25 kilogram of wheat. This is an individual consumer in economics. But the factory which is making a bread will not purchase 25 kilogram, will not purchase 15 kilogram, maybe it purchase 100 kilogram of wheat, or suppose 10 quintal of wheat. So this is an enterprise. So the consumer in an economics can be an individual, a family or a household, or can be an entity, a factory or manufacturers. Now, when the household or a family purchase the wheat, they consume it. And when a factory or a bread making factory, when they purchase the wheat, they just transform the wheat into flour and then into bread. And that is what ये है यहाँ पे जो लिखा हुआ है वो हम अब समझेंगे. So the consumer, be an individual or an enterprise, they purchase the commodity either for final use, like the household, like an individual, or for use in the further production, like in example जो मैंने आपको दिया था, like bread making. ठीक है, इसमें क्या हुआ कि ये सेम हमने क्या बताया कि each producer of commodities intends to sell her output. ठीक है, क्या सेल कर रहे हैं? गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. कैसे गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज है? सेलेबल गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. ठीक है, each producer of commodities intends to sell her output, that is sellable goods and services produced, to the consumer. And the consumer may be an individual, or consumer may be an enterprise. The individual who is consuming the goods and services may be purchase the goods and services for a final use, and an enterprise, they may purchase the goods and services for using it in further production. Now, when a good is used for further production, it loses its specific characteristics and transforms into another good through a production process. So when a good is used for further production, ठीक है, it loses its specific characteristic and it transformed into another good. Like here, wheat. When undergoes a production process, a transformation process, it loses its characteristic of being wheat and turns into bread. And the bread is a totally another good. And how this is happening? This is happening through a production process. So the concept is clear that in an economy, we have resources. Resources are utilized. When resources are utilized, we have sellable goods and services being produced. These sellable goods and services which are produced by the producer, they are then sold to the consumers. Consumer may be an individual, consumer may be an enterprise, and the goods or services which may be purchased by the individual for its final use or maybe by an enterprise for further production. करेक्ट. सो हमने अभी तक तीन चीजें क्लियर कर ली. फर्स्ट, जो भी रिसोर्सेस है हमारे पास, सिर्फ रिसोर्सेस होना इनफ नहीं है, उन रिसोर्सेस को यूटिलाइज करना भी इनफ है. दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू यूटिलाइज द रिसोर्स. सो व्हेन यू आर यूटिलाइजिंग द रिसोर्सेस, यू विल गेट द रिजल्ट इन द फॉर्म ऑफ goods and services or production of commodities. So when a good or a service is produced in an economy, what to do next? The next is the selling of the goods and services which are produced, because each producer who produces a goods and service, they intends to sell their output, and they sell to whom? They sell to the consumers. In an economy, the consumer doesn't mean an individual. Consumer means an individual along with an enterprise. And the goods and services which are being produced may be consumed by the consumer as a final use, or may be it used for production of another goods. Correct? Now, come to the next part. Example. We have there is a farmer. सपोज कीजिए एक किसान है. एक किसान ने रॉ कॉटन प्रोड्यूस किया है. देयर इज अ फार्मर and farmer has produced raw cotton, and this raw cotton produced by the farmer, the raw cotton produced by the farmer is sold to a spinning mill, where this raw cotton undergoes a production process and transformed into yarn in a spinning mill. This is the process. This is first process. Now, this yarn is transformed into cloth in a textile mill. The yarn which is produced by the spinning mill is then sold to a textile mill, and in that textile mill, this yarn transformed into cloth, and this cloth through a productive process transformed into article of clothing like shirt, pant, etc. So here the steps of production process under which a specific good transformed into another good is clearly visible. So, from a raw cotton to yarn, from yarn to cloth, and from cloth to the clothing articles like shirt and etc. तो जो मैं आपको बता रहा था वो अभी क्लियर हो चुका होगा कि हाउ अ रॉ मटेरियल may be consumed by an individual or may be used by an entity or manufacturer or producer, and it is transformed into another good. So how a raw cotton is being transformed into a clothing article, it is clear. Okay, so goods and services is not only to be consumed by a single consumer, or it is not only a final consumption. Maybe it could be helpful in further production process. It may be transformed into another good. So now this article is ready to be sold finally. Which article? Shirt. कैसे बना? कॉटन से. कॉटन से यार्न, यार्न से क्लोथ, क्लोथ से the clothing article, the shirt. Now this article is ready to be sold finally to the consumer for final use and has not to pass any more stages of production or transformation. So this good will be called as final good. Now this is the first concept to be understood. What is a final good? Why do we call this a final good? Why not that raw cotton is said to be the final good? Why not that yarn is said to be the final good? Why this article, means the clothing article, which is ready to be sold finally to the consumer, is called the final good? So this article is said to be the final good only because of first and second, these two reasons. First reason is वो good or services which is ready to be sold in the economy and which does not undergo any transformations, which have not to pass or go through any further stages of production or more stages of production, is called a final good. So final good could be characterized which does not undergo any further change or transformation at the hands of producer or purchaser. दो वर्ड्स हैं यहाँ पे, इसको बहुत ध्यान से समझना है आपको. पहला क्या है? Because it does not undergo any further change or transformation. Change or transformation at the hands of producer or purchaser. Second is, once it has been sold, it passes out of the active economic flow. Now, अब एक एग्जांपल आप समझिए. जैसे we have tea leaves, चाय पत्ती. Now, when the tea leaf is purchased by two consumers, first consumer is a household or say any individual. the purchaser. When this tea leaf or ये चाय पत्ती is not consumed directly by the consumer, correct? This tea leaves undergoes a change. When this tea leaves mix with some important ingredients, it forms a tea. This tea is finally consumed, correct? So what is to be understood? The tea leaf is the final good, or this tea is the final good? Chai ki patti is the final good, or with the help of this tea leaf we are preparing a tea. The tea is a final good. Which one is a final good? Understand it. When this tea leaf is consumed by a household, and in our home, in our house, when our mama prepares the tea, preparing or cooking food or any article in home is not accounted or calculated as an economic activity. So that's why for an household, this tea will be understood as a final good. But what happens if suppose the making of a tea by the use of tea leaves is happening in a restaurant, is happening in a hotel, where this tea which is prepared with the help of this tea leaves is sold. So when this tea is sold, the tea leaves is no more a final good. It becomes an input. An input which is going through or passing through more stages of production, and it is transforming into a tea. Here, this tea is the final good. So that's why a final good is not in the nature of the good produced. It is not the nature of the good which decide that this good is a final good. It is the nature of the economic activity involved which decides that whether this good is final or a kind of intermediary or intermediate. Okay, so यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं, करेक्ट, कि the economic nature of the use of the good makes the good a final good, and it is not the nature of the good which makes it or specify it or characterize it as a final good. It is just the economic activity or the nature of the use of the good, the economic nature of the use of the good which makes it a final good. So, by the using of resources, we have produced goods and services. So it is clear right now that